I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Nations have pledged $7 billion to Gaza reconstruction at the first Board of Peace meeting. Britain's former Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released under investigation after his arrest for alleged misconduct in public office. And Trump warns Iran to make a deal in 10 to 15 days or really bad things will happen. US President Donald Trump says that nations have pledged $7 billion to the Gaza Reconstruction Fund during the first inaugural Board of Peace meeting in Washington. He also proposed a multinational force in the post-war country with troops from Albania, Kazakhstan and Kosovo. But it would require the full disarmament of Hamas and support from Israel, a condition that remains uncertain. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump convened the inaugural meeting of his newly formed Board of Peace in Washington, bringing together representatives from nearly 50 countries to advance a reconstruction and stabilization framework for Gaza. During the session, Trump announced that contributing nations had raised more than $7 billion towards an initial relief and reconstruction package.
Together, we're committed to achieving a Gaza that is properly governed throughout. The whole area is going to be, so many countries that have really nothing to do with the Middle East, but they may be somewhat close by today. And I'm pleased to announce that Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and Kuwait have all contributed more than $7 billion toward the relief package. That's great. Thank you, fellas. Thank you.
Coexistence among Egypt supports the mandate of the Board of Peace.
The achievements of the ceasefire is real.
Supporting Gaza through the Board of Peace.
Several countries outlined their pledges. Qatar committed $1 billion. The United Arab Emirates announced $1.2 billion, while Saudi Arabia and Kuwait each confirmed $1 billion contributions. Kazakhstan offered financial support and wheat supplies as part of humanitarian assistance. President Trump initially included Azerbaijan in the $7 billion package. However, Azerbaijan's assistant to the president, Hikmet Hajiyev, later clarified that while Azerbaijan supports the Board of Peace as a founding member and may consider future investment projects in Gaza, it does not envisage participating in the announced financial initiative. On security, Indonesia pledged up to 8,000 troops for a proposed international stabilization force. Morocco, Kazakhstan and Albania committed personnel, while Egypt and Jordan agreed to train Palestinian police units. The force is expected to begin deployment in Rafah, with longer-term plans to expand to 12,000 police officers and 20,000 soldiers. Leaders also highlighted reconstruction priorities, including housing, electricity, water, healthcare, education, and digital infrastructure. The World Bank will act as a limited trustee for donor funds, providing financial oversight. Despite previous criticism of the United Nations, Trump said the board would work closely with the organization and pledged US support to ensure it remains viable.
We're going to be working with the United Nations very closely. We're going to bring them back. I think the United Nations has great potential, really great potential. It has not lived up to potential. The 8 wars, I never even spoke to them about one of them, and I should be speaking to them about all of them. Someday I won't be here. The United Nations will be, I think, is going to be much stronger, and the Board of Peace is going to almost be looking over the United Nations and making sure it runs properly. But we're going to strengthen up the United Nations.
Major political questions remain unresolved, including the disarmament of Hamas, the withdrawal of Israeli forces, and Gaza's long-term governance. While declaring the war in Gaza over, Trump warned that failure by Hamas to disarm would be harshly met. The board's success will now depend on whether pledged funds materialize and whether security and political conditions allow reconstruction to move from plans to reality.
Palestinians have expressed reluctance over plans to reconstruct the Gaza Strip. This comes after US President Donald Trump announced contributions of more than $7 billion from members of his Board of Peace.
Gazans hope that the billions of dollars that has been pledged towards the reconstruction of the Strip will actually benefit them. It comes after US President Donald Trump's first Board of Peace meeting on Thursday, where he announced contributions of more than $7 billion. However, Palestinians have reacted cautiously.
We hope that the reconstruction happens quickly and that the money that has been allocated truly goes to the right place and isn't mismanaged in any way.
No, of course I'm not optimistic because all of this feels pointless. It's just media talk and nothing will actually happen. There won't be any reconstruction. This is clearly part of a plan by the occupation with the Americans involved. Why? To push us out of our land and our country. God is sufficient for us and He is the best disposer of affairs. We pray, God willing, that it will be a blessed time and that reconstruction will take place, but in the end I'm not optimistic at all.
Hamas has been reluctant to surrender its weapons under Trump's 20-point Gaza plan, which led to a ceasefire last October. Both sides blame each other for violations since the ceasefire began. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there will be no reconstruction in Gaza until the territory is demilitarized.
And regarding Gaza, our forces are tightening their grip on the Strip from all directions. You were there, you know. According to the war objectives we set, Hamas will be dismantled of its weapons and Gaza will be demilitarized. And we agreed with our friends in the United States. There will be no reconstruction of the Strip before it is demilitarized.
Key issues likely to test the Trump's board's effectiveness in the months ahead include the disarmament of Hamas and the withdrawal of Israeli troops, the size of the reconstruction fund, and the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza's war-affected population.
Britain's former Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released under investigation. It's after being arrested yesterday on suspicion of misconduct in public office, linked to his past role as a UK trade envoy. Police say no charges have been filed and inquiries are ongoing. Buckingham Palace insists the law must take its course as the royal family faces renewed scrutiny. Our correspondent Zainab Farajzadeh has more.
United Kingdom's former Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has left police station following his arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office on Thursday morning. He was photographed reclined in the back of a vehicle leaving Aylsham police station at around 7 p.m. local time and was released under investigation. Former Prince's arrest came on the same day he turned 66. Police have been searching addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk, including the Royal Lodge in Windsor, where he lived until recently. Officers say the investigation relates to allegations that he passed documents and information to Jeffrey Epstein while working as a UK trade envoy, stressing that no charges have been brought. The King, who was not told about the arrest in advance, said in the statement that the law must take its course. Prince William and Catherine are understood to support that position. The family of Virginia Giuffre, who accused Andrew of sexual abuse and died last year, said they felt vindicated by the arrest. Her brother Sky Roberts said the news brought a sense of justice for his sister and urged the royal family to use the moment to push for accountability and cultural change. Giuffre made global headlines after a photograph of her as a teenager with Andrew emerged in 2011. She accused him of abusing her when she was underage and filed a civil case in 2021, which was settled the following year without an admission of wrongdoing. Andrew, the second son of the late Queen Elizabeth, has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to Epstein and has said he regrets their friendship. Misconduct in public office is a serious common law offence in the UK and carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment, with cases heard in the Crown Court. Police say the investigation is ongoing and further updates will follow. Zainab Farajzadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
The family of Virginia Giuffre say they feel vindicated after Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office yesterday. Giuffre had settled a lawsuit in 2022 in which she accused the former prince of sexually abusing her as a teenager at Epstein's properties.
This is where the house of cards starts falling. And, you know, kudos to the UK for taking the first step, for saying, you know what, we are going to arrest somebody who is held to one of the highest esteems out there, somebody who was a former prince. I mean, this hasn't been done before. And so to know what we should expect, it's really naive to say that we do, but we won't stop. I mean, Virginia said it so clearly in her statements, and I'll say it again here today, like, we won't stop until justice is served.
And following on from this, US President Donald Trump has expressed concern over Andrew's arrest, describing the situation as unfortunate for the royal family, while also stressing his own innocence in the matter. Here's what he had to say.
Well, you know, I'm the expert in a way because I've been totally exonerated. That's very nice. I can actually speak about it very nicely. I think it's a shame. I think it's very sad. I think it's so bad for the royal family. It's a very, very sad. To me, it's a very sad thing. When I see that, it's a very sad thing to see it and to see what's going on with his brother, who's obviously coming to our country very soon, and he's a fantastic man, the King. So I think it's a very sad thing. It's really interesting because nobody used to speak about Epstein when he was alive, but now they speak. But I'm the one that can talk about it because I've been totally exonerated. I did nothing. In fact, the opposite. He was against me. He was fighting me in the election, which I just found out through the last 3 million pages of documents.
Meanwhile, as news of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's arrest sent shockwaves globally, the United Nations says it's declining to comment on the matter. However, the UN spokesperson has called for increased investigations into the Epstein files.
I have no comment on the particular the circumstances and the reasons of the detention of Mr. Windsor Mountbatten today. That's not for us to get involved in. But as we've said before, there should be increased investigations into the abuse of women and girls that we have seen by Mr. Epstein that spans many different countries and jurisdictions. Thank you.
And now moving on to the US-Iran tensions, US President Donald Trump has warned Iran to make a deal in 10 to 15 days, or really bad things will happen. The comment comes as Iran and Russia conduct Navy exercises in the Indian Ocean.
Speaking at his first Board of Peace meeting held in Washington on Thursday, US President Donald Trump warned Iran it must do a deal surrounding its nuclear program. He made the comment after talks in Geneva made no real breakthrough, despite sides saying there was progress.
And we do have some work to do with Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You can't have peace in the Middle East if they have a nuclear weapon. And they can't have a nuclear weapon, and they've been told that very strongly. They cannot continue to threaten the stability of the entire region, and they must make a deal. Or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But bad things will happen.
Trump hopes the large buildup of military aircraft in the region piles on enough pressure for a deal to be reached. However, Iran and Russia conducted joint naval exercises in the Sea of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean on Thursday. Navy authorities said the exercises were aimed to promote security and sustainable maritime interactions. The increase of military on both sides in the region comes as Tehran refuses to give up its nuclear program and denies it plans to develop atomic weapons.
The European Council has formally decided to add Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps to the European Union's list of terrorist organisations. The move follows a political agreement reached by the bloc's Foreign Affairs Council late last month. As a result of the designation, the IRGC will face restrictive measures under the EU's counter-terrorism sanctions regime, including the freezing of its funds and economic resources within member states. Indonesia and the United States have signed a reciprocal trade agreement, with Washington maintaining the 19% tariff previously agreed on goods exported by the Southeast Asia nation. The deal follows months of negotiations after Washington last year reduced tariffs on Indonesian exports to 19%, down from an initial rate of 32%. Indonesia's government said products including coffee, chocolate, natural rubber and spices would be exempt from tariffs. It added that exemptions may also be granted for nearly 1,700 other commodities, including its top export, palm oil. NASA is moving closer to sending astronauts around the moon with its Artemis 2 mission, completing a crucial fueling test after earlier technical issues. The crew, including 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, is set to make the farthest human journey into space in over 50 years.
NASA has completed a second fueling test of its Artemis 2 rocket at Cape Canaveral in Florida. This follows an earlier test in February that ran into hydrogen leaks and other technical issues. The tests are key to making sure the rocket is ready for its historic mission around the moon. Artemis 2 is part of NASA's multi-billion-dollar Artemis program and will carry 4 astronauts on a 10-day journey around the moon, marking the first crewed lunar flight in more than 50 years. The crew includes 3 Americans, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover and Christina Koch, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. The mission will take humans farther into space than ever before.
I'm the commander for the Artemis 2 mission to the moon.
To the moon.
To the moon. To the moon.
NASA had initially planned to launch earlier this month, but delays from a recent launch rehearsal pushed the earliest opportunity to March. Officials say the fueling tests are critical to ensuring a safe launch and a successful journey around the moon and back.
This is the Earthrise.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return we'll examine what came out of President Trump's first Board of Peace meeting and whether it can translate pledges into real outcomes. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. President Donald Trump has chaired the first meeting of his newly launched Board of Peace in Washington, pitching it as a new mechanism for conflict resolution and post-war reconstruction, with a heavy focus on Gaza. The meeting featured pledges and political signalling, but also raised questions about credibility, implementation, and whether this structure complements or competes with existing international frameworks. Let's bring in our guest, Gustavo de Aristegui, former diplomat from Rabat, Morocco. Ambassador, welcome to the program.
For having me on the show.
So let's start with the basics here. What are the tangible outcomes or the main takeaways from this meeting? So not just the optics, but commitments, mechanisms and timelines.
Well, we saw an ambitious President Trump that wants to go beyond the Gaza reconstruction program that he launched back in October. He even said it very clearly. Well, one good news, he said that he has great expectations for United Nations, that the United States is not going to abandon the United Nations, that they have no intention of replacing the United Nations. They say, in a part of his speech, he did say very clearly that they would try to be the conscience of the United Nations. Then the second thing that he said, which was very interesting, is that he personally, as President of the United States, had intervened successfully in at least 8 conflicts. And most of the protagonists of those conflicts were sitting there. And but then the protagonists of those solved conflicts or tensions are participating in the Board of Peace not only because their conflicts or their tensions were solved, but because they have a commitment with peace in their region and a commitment to peace in the Middle East and whichever other conflict may arise in the world. One of those examples, very clear example, is the president of Azerbaijan, who was praised by President Trump because of the flexibility and his quest for peace in the recent agreement to reduce tensions and open a new era of relations with your neighbor Armenia. Well, this is very good news, but it means that the president of Azerbaijan is not only there because the tensions with your neighbor have been solved, but because he wants to be an active part of the solution to other very, very grave and dangerous conflicts that are endangering world stability and peace. And of course, the first that comes to mind is obviously the Middle East conflict and Gaza. But there are other places. Ukraine is still a raging war. There is the possibility of a confrontation, of an attack of the United States because of the lack of compliance of the Iranian regime to comply with their obligations not to enrich uranium at a level higher than 6%, which is what is required for a civilian, peaceful, energy-producing nuclear program. Their enrichment has gone beyond 70% to reach 90, which is the level grade enrichment. So, and of course, Azerbaijan, your country, is a very important key player, strategically placed, that has reached to Eastern Europe, reached to the Caucasus, and reached to Central Asia and to the Middle East, because you are in that central part of the world. So I do think that this shows that the 27 heads of state, heads of government, or foreign ministers that were present representing their 27 countries have decided really to engage in a new kind of diplomacy, a more hands-on diplomacy, a more practical diplomacy that, to be frank, and I mean, it's logical that the President Trump did not criticize the things that are obviously criticizable about the United Nations, but the United Nations is a mammoth that spends more than 35% of its budget in administration and structural cost, and some reports say that it's more close to 50. It's completely preposterous, and the lack of bilateral or trilateral peace arrangements and peace negotiations go on. This is why Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, or Qatar especially, has made of mediation and conflict resolution their DNA, their basic political and foreign policy DNA, and now the Board of Peace, because the United Nations simply is not efficient.
Actually, staying on the United Nations, Ambassador, I remember early in the piece when the Board of Peace was being constructed and came together, Trump was actually very dismissive of the United Nations, and he almost made it sound like the Board of Peace would replace the United Nations, and in layman terms he did call it rather useless. What caused this pivot, do you think, now that he's saying there's more of a construct where they'll be working hand in hand and the Board of Peace will be the conscience of the United Nations, as you said earlier?
Because it is very clear. After all, the United Nations does have the international law and the world legitimacy to do certain things. The Security Council is the body in the world that dictates resolutions that are mandatory in their fulfillment and abiding. And then there are 5 permanent members who are still part of the old world order that have veto powers in the Council, and the United Nations is the body that can give legitimacy to peacekeeping forces, peacemaking forces, 2 different things. Let's be very clear about that. Many people confuse things. Peace peace-making forces are those that impose peace on two raging war factions. For example, something that should be done in Sudan, in my opinion. And a peacekeeping force is that interposes itself between two formerly raging war factions to make sure that they do not engage in war again. And the only body in the world that has the legitimacy to call on this and to actually authorize this kind of action is the United Nations. And the third thing is because the United Nations has been there since 1945. And this means that they have a lot of personnel on the ground in different parts of the world, and there's a lot of agency of the United Nations that are essential to the well-being of the most needy part of the world population. The World Food Program, UNICEF, and so many other agencies, the Special Envoy for Refugees. We're talking about dozens of agencies that are doing a phenomenal job in different parts of the world, and the world could not do without them, and nobody can replace that. The only country in the world, the only body in the world that can actually do this is the United Nations.
Okay. And Ambassador, as you very well underlined earlier, we did hear a talk of reconstruction funding and pledges. What matters more here, the headline numbers or governance and oversight of how any fund would actually work?
Well, the oversight of what of the funds that are going to be used needs to be clarified, of course. Let's not forget that the United States, that is the leader of the Board of Peace, is a democracy, nobody can criticize the institutions of the United States. The United States is a serious country. They have the Comptroller General. They have the General Administration, Services Administration. They have all the checks and balances necessary to make sure that money is not detoured from its original goals and targets. Let's be very clear about one thing also, that right now there's only $7 billion that have been pledged by the different countries. $7 billion are going to be pledged by the United States. That's only $14 billion. And we are the optimistic calculation of what it's going to take to reconstruct Gaza is $70 billion. And we think that it's more in the neighborhood of $130 billion. So we're very, very far from that. So other bodies and institutions are going to have to pitch in. Those that don't want to participate in the Board of Peace, for example, my country, Spain, because of its hard left-wing government, the Prime Minister of Spain has said that they don't want to participate. But ideology should not be an obstacle to make sure that the countries that want to participate in the only mechanism that has proven to be A, in place, and B, willing to give the money to reconstruct Gaza is the Board of Peace. Let's not forget also that when the United Nations organizes the donor conferences, they are normally quite a flop. The donor conferences are hardly ever a success. I think that this has been much bigger a success than any donor conference that we have seen in the past.
And as far as who showed up and who stayed away is itself a message. What does the attendee list tell us about the coalition Trump is trying to build?
Well, there's all kinds of nations there, if you see. They are democracies, they are authoritarian regimes. For example, the President Lukashenko was there. There are huge democracies, like is the case of Indonesia, with a very prominent role right now in a very tight relation with the United States, and Central Asian countries that have an increased degree of cordiality and closeness to the United States, as is the case of your country, Azerbaijan, which is very good news for your region, because you are a key player in that part of the world. And then, of course, there are very well-established democracies as Argentina or other places. Argentina, after all, since the end of the military dictatorship and with all its flaws and shortcomings, is a democracy. And not only people that have a let's call it an ideological proximity or coincidence with President Trump, but people that even have that belong to other sides of of the world influence spheres. So I think it's a very good sign that countries that are so diverse, that have different government types and different ideologies at their helm, come together for one purpose that is very noble, very necessary, and very urgent. In this case, the reconstruction of Gaza, and participating very actively with their knowledge and with their leadership and with their vision in the resolution of other conflicts around the world.
Okay, my last question to you, Ambassador. If Gaza is the initial test case, what's the central political gap here? Are we looking at security arrangements, post-war governance, or the question of who legitimately represents Palestinians?
Well, the legitimate representation of the Palestinians is not Hamas. Hamas is a mafiosi terrorist organization that has used Gazans and Palestinians as human shields. The first arm of oppression and repression in Gaza is Hamas. Then, of course, the Palestinian National Authority has to be revised, has to be renewed, has to be given new energy and youth. There has to be some kind of an election. There has to be some kind of succession to Mahmoud Abbas. They have to show that they are effective, competent, and honest in their management. The Palestinian Authority, let's not be too naive about it, has been riddled by corruption and mismanagement. And this is one of the reasons why, of course, it gives an excuse to all the other parties in the region, including Hamas and the Israeli government. Not putting Hamas and the Israeli government in the same level, not at all. To drag their feet and say the Palestinian Authority is not capable of such a complex task. Second reasoning that we have to analyze. The security arrangements are of the essence. Right now, because there is a delay in implementing the peace and security arrangements in Gaza, the Palestinians are seeing again how Hamas changing uniforms from their battle fatigues to blue, but it's the same people. It's the same dog with a different color. These guys are the same thugs, the same terrorists. They're not exhibiting war weapons, but they are on the streets, they are on the crossroads, they are enforcing law enforcement, if you can call it that way. It's not law enforcement, let's just call it enforcement, or security enforcement if you want. Definitely not law enforcement, and this is Hamas disguised into something else. There needs to be an international peacemaking/keeping force in this case, that will be comprised of different countries of the world. But in my opinion, it should be countries that have a very good relationship with the State of Israel, but are Muslim countries. For example, good or simply diplomatic relations. You know, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Jordan, Morocco. These are the countries that could be a perfect match to send peacekeeping troops into Gaza, and the Board of Peace, with the people on the terrain, should design, implement, and launch a security body. And last but not least, the effective management and governance of the Gaza Strip is going to fall into the hands of independent, competent Palestinians, people that live in the West Bank or in Gaza, or that will come from the Palestinian exodus. People that are around the world, that are extremely competent professionals in different fields of the world, that could be an essential addition to the governance, stabilization, and prosperity of Gaza.
Ambassador Aristegui, it's always a pleasure talking to you on the program. Thank you for your analysis today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. My warmest regards.
Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. During the Board of Peace meeting, US President Donald Trump highlighted the peace declaration signed by Armenia and Azerbaijan in Washington last year, emphasizing that there is nothing more important than peace.
You think that was easy? It wasn't easy. These are two tough people, good people, but tough people. But, you know, we're in the Oval Office, and we were getting near. But the one was at one side of the room. I have two chairs right in front of the desk, the beautiful, resolute desk. One's over here. One's on the other side of the room. I said, folks, could you get a little closer? Well, I don't know. They felt very uncomfortable. You know, they've been killing each other for 32 years. So I say, can you get a little closer? After 1 hour, they were right next to each other. We made a deal. They hugged, they signed, and we had peace with two very important countries, and I'll never forget it. So they started off a little weak, and they ended up really strong, and you can be very proud of yourselves. It was a beautiful thing to see. Thank you. Look at that. Can you believe it? 32 years. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Russia's approach in the South Caucasus may be evolving. Political analyst Alexandra Filipenko from the Institute for US and Canada Studies says Moscow has shifted towards what she describes as hybrid tactics to blending political pressure, influence operations and strategic manoeuvring. Speaking to A News, she argues Azerbaijan now sits at the centre of that recalibrated strategy.
Russia's approach in the South Caucasus has changed. As political analyst Alexandra Filipenko explains, Moscow no longer relies on permanent troops or acting as a security broker. Instead, she says, the pressure has become hybrid.
Instead of direct control, Russia increasingly relies on some economic pressure, economic frictions, some information campaigns or disinformation campaigns, some political pressure, political signaling, and some kind of selective destabilization. So Russia has moved from being the guarantee for certain results to being the spoiler of the results that Moscow doesn't like.
Filipenko argues that Azerbaijan is central to this shift. After the 2020 war and the restoration of full sovereignty in 2023, Moscow lost leverage linked to Karabakh. For years, Russia promoted settlement frameworks that critics say would have drawn Azerbaijan into Moscow-led structures such as the CSTO and the Eurasian Economic Union. Those proposals did not materialize. A political project involving businessman Ruben Vardanyan in Karabakh also collapsed. Azerbaijani authorities detained him after regaining control of the region. At the same time, Baku deepened ties with Washington, signed a strategic cooperation charter, and expanded energy exports to the European Union, reducing Russia's role as a key regional energy broker.
So those projects for Moscow, it's not about just diplomacy, it's geopolitical erosion. And some information campaigns or disinformation campaigns, they fit that pattern. In Russian strategy, information is not secondary, it's the tool. It's the operational tool. Delegitimizing leadership, portraying some elites as reckless or maybe controlled by someone or some forces, and of course amplifying domestic tensions. These are the standard methods of influence, of course.
Following the closure of several Russian-linked organizations in Azerbaijan, including the Russian House and the Sputnik outlet, analysts report an increase in cyber activity and online disinformation targeting Baku. Analysts say Russia's approach is no longer about military presence, but about influence, political, economic, and informational across the South Caucasus.
Turkey has signalled its readiness to train police, rebuild the health and education sectors and contribute troops as part of Gaza's reconstruction. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan made the commitments at the inaugural meeting of US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Washington on Thursday.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said Turkey is ready to assist in the rehabilitation of Gaza's health and education sectors and help train police forces in the embattled Palestinian territory. Fidan made the remarks in Washington at the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace chaired by U.S. President Donald Trump. He stressed Ankara's continued support for U.S.-led peace efforts and stated that Turkey was prepared to provide troops for a proposed international stabilization force for Gaza. According to Fidan, the ceasefire in Gaza was achieved after 2 years of human suffering, crediting what he described as President Trump's personal engagement and collective diplomatic efforts for the breakthrough. But he went on to warn that Gaza's humanitarian situation remained fragile and that ceasefire violations continue to occur, calling for a prompt, coordinated, and effective international response.
Our message is this: whether it's humanitarian aid, the administration of Gaza, infrastructure and superstructure services, or contributing to international stabilization force, we are ready to provide all kinds of support in all these areas.
Several other countries have already pledged to send troops for the proposed stabilization force, including Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, and Albania. The initiative is aimed at ensuring security, stability, and reconstruction efforts in Gaza following the conflict in which tens of thousands of people in Gaza have been killed. While in Washington, Fidan also reiterated Turkey's hope that the United States would pursue what he described as genuine negotiations with Iran. He added that diplomatic engagement would help avert the need for a military operation or broader war in an already volatile Middle East region. This is Adam Mara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Georgian security forces say they have foiled an alleged plot to acquire and move radioactive material out of the country, arresting 2 foreign nationals in a counterintelligence operation. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi.
The State Security Service of Georgia says 2 foreign nationals have been arrested in Kutaisi for attempting to illegally purchase nuclear material, uranium and radioactive substance, cesium-137. According to the agency, the suspects were planning to buy the materials for $3 million and transport them to another country. The arrests were carried out by officers from the State Security Service, Counterintelligence and Special Operations Department after processing operational information. Authorities say that the suspects had been traveling to Georgia frequently in recent weeks. They were reportedly trying to create favorable conditions to purchase and move the nuclear and radioactive substances. The State Security Service warned that uranium and cesium-137 can be used for serious criminal acts, including terrorist purposes. Notably, it's not the first such case. Last year, in Batumi, 2 people were detained for handling and attempting to sell $3 million worth of uranium, which could have been used to make a deadly bomb. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Now, after the break, we'll unpack Turkey's signal that it's ready to contribute troops and support to Gaza and what that could mean for a stabilization force. Stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. Turkey says it's ready to contribute to Gaza in every way possible, including participation in an international stabilization force, alongside support for administration, infrastructure and humanitarian efforts. The statement delivered by Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan raises major questions about mandate, feasibility and how regional players would coordinate any post-war security framework. Let's bring in our guest, Mr. Mehmet Öğütçü. He's chairman of London Energy Club and former Turkish diplomat, joining us from London, UK. Mehmet, welcome to the programme.
My pleasure.
So first up, what exactly is Turkey offering? We know we've heard troops, training, policing, support, reconstruction, and what would be the stated mission?
Well, Turkey has been ready and willing from the very beginning to contribute to a settlement in Gaza and ensuring security for all, including for Israel, as well as for governance and reconstruction. I think it all goes in sequence. So first, we have to have a peace, no violations of ceasefire, then security arrange, governance, investment, reconstruction, and a political future. So I think in all these processes, Turkey could play a critical role. As you said during the meeting in Washington, Board of Peace, engineered by President Trump, Turkey made it clear alongside other countries, you mentioned 9 countries, and surprisingly, European countries were represented at a very low level. UK, France, Germany sent junior officials just to signal that they don't want Board of Peace to hijack the role of United Nations, although we know it's not so effective. So I think here what Turkey can provide is quite open and clear, whereas will there be any willingness on the part of Israel, currently occupying Gaza and wants to have the upper hand on whatever happens in Gaza, be it security, reconstruction, training of police and humanitarian aid? In that regard, I think an understanding has to be reached between Washington, Tel Aviv and Ankara on what role Turkey will have. Because the Israeli politicians, I think yesterday I was listening to a former Prime Minister of Israel saying that Turkey is the next Iran. So there's a very strong anti-Turkish sentiment now in Israeli politics, and whether they will allow Turkish boots to arrive in Gaza or not, I think is still open question. The only hope for a bridging country like Turkey, a powerful regional country providing all this assistance essential for Gaza, and not only financial, as the Gulf countries will do, but military, reconstruction, and roads, and hospitals, schools, as well as a good understanding with the residents of Gaza, because they see Turkey as a hope. So how these differences will be reconciled between Turkey and Israel, and the aspirations of the Palestinian people and the international environment, I think a lot of things are reliant on how Trump will be moving ahead, because clearly he will be clashing with Netanyahu on what role Turkey should be playing, and it has to be defined very well. Otherwise, Turkey's engagement in Gaza will be politically risky, economically devastating as well. Therefore, before Turkey and other nations, you mentioned Indonesia sending almost 30,000 troops, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Morocco, I think it has to be well defined at the outset what role each of them will play: financial, military, trainer, reconstruction, and peacemaking and peacekeeping, and then things could work. Otherwise, even Trump being behind it, this could prove to be a catastrophe for Gaza again. So I think that Trump will be very, very careful, making sure that his initiative will take off successfully and achieve results that will be satisfactory for Israel and the Palestinians.
And how feasible is deployment without a settled political end state in Gaza? In other words, can stabilization precede a political settlement?
I think there has to be some signals on what kind of settlement we are looking for, politically speaking. Whether it's going to be a two-state solution, which Israel is not willing to choose this path, or is it going to be Palestinian Authority in East Jerusalem will be also governing together with the international coalition, the Gaza, and how long it's going to continue. So first, I think we have to have a clear understanding from Israel what they are willing to go ahead with. Otherwise, it will be a vain effort, a wasted effort, bringing together so many countries, so many financial resources, and also competence in terms of economic construction, governance, and security, but without having a clear end result. And so I think that's the first thing I hope, behind the scenes, if not publicly, Trump and the countries joining Board of Peace, as well as these low-profile engagers like UK, France, Germany, perhaps also China and Russia somehow, should be consulted and brought into the picture. But it shouldn't be another UN operating there, because we know that UN has not performed well. That's the reason why Trump initiated this Board of Peace effort. And for it to be effective, I think from the very, very outset, the terms of reference and the objectives and the end results should be defined well and agreed. Otherwise, I don't think that we will see any solution in terms of relief to the Palestinian people, in terms of the political future that everybody wants to see happening. Otherwise, this conflict will linger on as it has done for decades.
Okay, as far as having the conditions defined, as you said, what would Turkey require as preconditions? Amongst ceasefire, durability, withdrawal terms, guarantees for its forces, rules of engagement, and would Turkey accept a role under non-Turkish command?
I think Turkey is not in a position to impose any conditions right now, because now it's between Israel, US, Palestinians, and the international players coming later. So here, I think the game maker is the US and Israel, basically. If Israel flatly refuses, as it does through its official spokespersons, and Turkey coming to Gaza and joining the effort will be practically impossible. Therefore, I believe that it has to go hand in hand with the normalization of relations between Israel and Turkey. This has already started, actually. The foreign minister of Israel, when he was in Baku, made an appeal that they are willing to ease relations with Turkey. And then Hakan Fidan responded to that, saying that our objections are not structural. We can always find a solution, middle ground, provided that Israel respects the ceasefire rules and also don't continue its attacks in Gaza as it does still, despite all these efforts. Therefore, I believe that the signals are positive if Turkey and Israel start talking each other on pragmatic terms, leaving aside the emotions, which affect all of us, of course, but in state-to-state relations, hard realities and naked picture more important than emotional outburst. I think Turkey and Israel can come to a conclusion between themselves on Gaza, on Syria as well. Both countries are likely to clash on the Syrian battleground as they have different divergent interests and objectives. I think US will have to play a key role in bringing two parties together. If it happens, I think Turkey has so much to offer to Gaza settlement because it has good relations with Hamas. It can control extreme elements of Hamas. It has the technical ability of construction, infrastructure, electricity, water, all the amenities that Palestinians urgently need. It also has experience about local governance, capacity building in Palestine. It will be trusted by the Palestinians. And therefore, I think everybody needs a country like Turkey with a bridging role, but Turkey, I think, should act not in an ideological manner in terms of solidarity with Palestinians. This is, of course, we all know, but also understanding Israel's security concerns and interests, and then be a party which is acceptable to US, Israel, Palestinians, and all others participants in the Board of Peace. Because Board of Peace is not only for Gaza, I should remind you, as yes, stabilization force, reconstruction in Gaza, the #1 priority, but if it works well, then I think it could be extended to Syria, Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Sudan, where there are deep-rooted problems. And so it could be an example. But European countries are concerned that if it is successful, it might be replicating United Nations, leaving it aside, and that's something they are not willing to follow because they don't want to have United States imposing its own peace blueprint and vision all across the region.
Okay, Mr. Mehmet Öcü, that's all we have time for today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Likewise, many thanks.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Stay with us for more updates, and thank you for watching.